Today we have another problem where we are given that the square root of 1 plus the square root of 1 plus x is the cube root of x. We are also given that x is a real number and we need to solve for x. The first thing to do to make it a lot easier to read, we have to use substitution. So we have to let a random letter, let's say a, be equal to the cube root of x. So according to that logic, a cubed is equal to x. Now we substitute these values into the original equation. So it is now the square root of 1 plus the square root of 1 plus a cubed, because of the x, is all equal to a squared. Wait, sorry, a. Sorry. But the next step, we're going to get an a squared by squaring both sides. So it's going to be 1 plus the square root of a cubed plus 1, I just swapped around the order, is equal to a squared. Now we have to get rid of this square root. And we can do that by isolating this term or subtracting 1 from both sides. So a cubed plus 1, and take the square root, is equal to a squared minus 1. Well, 1 to the any power is still 1. So this one is, you can rewrite it as 1 squared. And according to the same logic, this one is also 1 cubed. So when you square both sides, you get that a cubed plus 1 cubed is equal to, this is already an equation, a plus 1 times a minus 1. That's this right here. Then you square it again, so a plus 1 times a minus 1. And the left-hand side, it's also an equation. This left-hand side is going to be equal to a plus 1 times a squared minus a plus 1, which is still equal to a plus 1 times a minus 1 times a plus 1 times a minus 1. There are actually two cases in the scenario. The first one is where, in order to divide, a plus 1 is not equal to 0. We're going to solve for the first case scenario. Now that we've declared that a plus 1 is not equal to 0, we can divide, or we can just cross out these two from both sides. So we now get that a squared, minus a plus 1 is equal to, now it's just a minus 1 squared times a plus 1. We can still figure out the left-hand side. So a squared minus a plus 1 is equal to a squared minus 2a plus 1 times a plus 1. We can further simplify this, where a squared minus a plus 1 is equal to a to the third power plus a squared minus 2a squared minus 2a plus a plus 1. We can further cross things out. Well, so it's going to be a squared minus a plus 1 is going to be equal to a to the third power minus a squared minus a plus 1. All right, so these two cross out and the ones cross out. So what you're left with is a squared is equal to a to the third power minus a squared. So you move the a squared to the right hand side. So, and then you can factor out an a squared. So 0 is equal to a squared times, well, this is a to get the a cubed minus 2, since it's now a 2 minus 2a squared. And now we have two possibilities, which a is equal to 0 and a is equal to 2 when a plus 1 is not equal to 0. We solved for the first scenario where a plus 1 is not equal to 0, but now there's a second scenario where a plus 1 is 0, so a is equal to -1. So now we have 3 answers for a. Now that we figured out the 3 values of a, we can find the 3 possible values of x. When a is -1, x is also equal to -1. When a is 0, x is also equal to 0. And when a is 2, x is equal to 8. Now all we have to do is plug these 3 values of x into the original equation to see if they're correct. Let's start with x is equal to -1. So let's just plug it in. So the square root of 1 plus the square root of 1 minus 1. This is just 0, so the square root of 1 plus 0 is the square root of 1. But when you plug this value in for the right-hand side, you get that it's the square root of -1, well, the cube root of -1. So these two answers are not equal, so this first solution does not work. Let's try x is equal to 0. When x is equal to 0, it's going to be the square root of 1 plus, 1 plus 0. This is just going to be equal to, the square root of 2. But when you plug x is equal to 0 into the right-hand side, you get that it's the cube root of 0, which is 0. So again, this is wrong. Let's try when x is 8. When x is equal to 8, it's going to be the square root of 1 plus the square root of 1 plus 8. That's just 3. And then 3 plus 1 is 4. In the end, you would get that this is 2. And when you plug x is equal to 8 into the right-hand side, you would also get that it's 2. So x is equal to 8 is our only answer.